Welcome back to Petty Astrology. I'm your host, Kaycee Felton-Lui. Another week of me reminding you that things have felt very heavy because they're serious. And they're serious issues that have long been neglected by most people, and especially those in power, that really need attending to. And there are big changes that need to be made. And we can't make change if those things aren't brought to light, if we don't shift the way that we approach things. But let me remind you that this doesn't have to mean we're reveling in misery at all times. It's important that we still look for hope. I saw something on the internet the other day, if you can believe it, that gave me a lot of hope. It's from a post on Blue Sky Social, which is kind of like Twitter if you haven't heard of it. And it's from Firestorm Books, which is a queer feminist co-op and community center in Asheville, North Carolina. And so the post says, the morning Hurricane Helene hit, Asheville members of our co-op sat in the dark, listening to the howling wind and crack of trees falling. When we emerged to take stock, a cardboard sign on our door read, "Community meeting here, Saturday at 2. Let's talk about how we can take care of each other." The first autonomous act by an anonymous neighbor set the stage for the week, with Firestorm becoming a container for other people's brilliant, beautiful, and generous self-organizing. About 40 people attended the first meeting. Nearly 400 attended the next one. The meetings, now a daily anchor, generated a multitude of connections and volunteer-powered projects. Before city officials had finished assessing the damage, community members were sharing supplies, doing wellness checks, and serving hot meals. Over the next days, things became more organized. Anarchist arborist crews cleared roads for trapped residents. Activists began building water distribution systems capable of delivering 6,000 gallons per day. Bike punks offered repair clinics. A farmer drove water supply loops to Firestorm from a spring. And an enthusiastic DIYer distributed dry toilets. In the midst of this anarchic moment, Firestorm isn't setting the agenda or directing anyone. We're offering a space that welcomes independent initiative. We're supporting the exchange of critical info, and we're modeling a do-it-ourselves approach that's responsive, experimental, and human scale. Yes, government and NGO aid is now flowing into the region, but the work of caring for one another continues to be done by neighbors, grassroots organizations, small businesses, and activists. It's done voluntarily, with thousands of actions synchronized through a shared solidarity. For a brief moment, the logic of the market is suspended, care is given freely, and everyone contributes what they can. It's a strange paradox that the utopia we dream of becomes most visible in the dark. People are coming together in some of the worst circumstances. They're helping each other and forming new understandings of what is possible for community. And that's why I talk about mutual aid. I talk about community building as much as I do, because we're going to need it. And it can show us how a better world is very possible. Even in dark moments, joy is possible. And we can't forget that. Today on the podcast, I talk about getting closer to yourself with this upcoming full moon in Aries on October 17th. Then, a look at the astrology of another big week as we finish out Pluto in Capricorn. We have had a lot going on here on planet Earth, and guess what? The fun doesn't stop. We have another full moon coming up. I have tried to record this so many times at this point. We've had internet outages, we've had the dog tap dancing around in the background, we've got sirens going on, we've got another dog in the neighborhood with separation anxiety going off. So, at this point, I've just started drinking and we're just going to roll with it, all right? I want to talk to you about the full moon. And I know that the astrology has been a lot lately for those of us living here on planet Earth. The hits just keep on coming. And, a lot of this stuff has been really tough to look at, to watch, to face if you are a sensitive person, if you are a conscientious person. The camera keeps going in and out of focus. It's comical at this point. It kind of feels like things haven't stopped in a long time. It's just kind of been like one thing after the other. And we have been, doing our best to move through it. So, a big full moon in Aries coming up is probably not what we want right now, but it's what we're getting. And it's a powerful moon. So, the full moon in Aries is happening on Thursday, October 17th at 4:26 a.m. Pacific time. And full moons are always when the moon opposes the sun, which is, of course, in Libra right now. And this full moon is also sextile Jupiter, and it's squaring Mars, and it's also squaring Pluto because Mars is in Cancer and Pluto is in Capricorn for the last time in our lifetimes. This is a lot of big energy. And Aries is not really known for being a subtle sign, so I'm not expecting much subtlety from this full moon. So this full moon is happening at 24 degrees and 35 minutes of Aries. So whatever house that falls into in your personal astrology chart is what area of life you're going to see the impact of this full moon energy play out in. Now, on a collective level, that means every single person on planet Earth, I'm going to tell you, this is a doozy. This is a big full moon. And we just finished eclipse season that we probably won't soon forget. And don't worry, we will not be seeing any more eclipses until March of 2025. But now here comes this full moon in Aries to kind of finish the job. And it's important to remember that this is our second to last full moon while Pluto is still in Capricorn. So, in that sense, it's a very significant one to pay attention to the events that are happening around the world, because I think these are giving us indicators of a lot of the things that we're going to be dealing with collectively when Pluto moves into Aquarius for the next 20 years in November. This is also the last full moon before the US presidential election, which I feel like has the overall energy of the world in this kind of terrible vacuum until then. And I really wish that that wasn't the case, because we obviously have a lot of violence. We have genocides that are going on. We have pandemics that are going unaddressed. And it feels like everything is in this horrible limbo while we wait for this race to be decided and kind of see what direction the United States empire is going to be going in next, and what kind of ball game that we're going to even be playing come January. So, with that said, the sun is going to be shining a light on just how imbalanced things are. And that was something that was really blown wide open with this last eclipse in Libra that we just had. The moon is reflecting what is imbalanced within ourselves, right? Because if we all live in an unjust place, how is it that we could be perfectly balanced, stable, well, and living our authentic truths? So, this full moon is happening towards the end of Libra season. And all throughout this Libra season, we've seen the sun shining a light on how very out of balance things are, how very unjust things are. And a lot of us knew that already, but I think that the more time goes on, the more of these catastrophic events that we see, the clearer it becomes that things are really wrong, and probably more wrong than a lot of people were willing to admit, because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to admit that the things that you've been taught have been lies, and perhaps that the country that you are a citizen of is actually the bad guy in most every situation around the world. And a lot of people are having to come to terms with these things, or they're ignoring how out of balance things are, and things are just getting more out of control for them as they try to keep up that delusion. And so the moon doesn't shine any light of its own. It's always reflecting the light of the sun. And so that's exactly what happens in a full moon. the sun is shining in a way that illuminates the moon fully. And so, in a symbolic sense, the moon is going to be reflecting what is imbalanced within ourselves. Because how can we live in a world that is so off balance, so unjust, and not see that reflected in us on an individual level? And I think that that has been true for a lot longer than many of us realize, because a lot of us have grown up feeling uncomfortable, out of place, wrong, or just deeply unhappy or unsatisfied. And when we really dig into a lot of that, how can a society where the average person's life has little to no value, where we're willing to push past people to get what we want and what we need, and who cares what happens to them, or, this injustice is happening to that group of people over there, and I'm not a part of that group, so who cares? That all takes a toll on who we are and the things that we want to accomplish on a personal, individual level. And so it may be that a lot of people are coming to terms with that in some way for this full moon. And that's a very uncomfortable situation. And guess what? Full moons are often feared because people don't like being uncomfortable. They don't like being uncomfortable. And people are already very uncomfortable. The people are pissed. And there's also a lot of fear and desire for protection and security, and people asking, what are all these taxes I'm paying for? If not to help these people that have lost everything in the wake of this climate disaster, or, how many tens of thousands of unhoused people that are living on the streets of a lot of our cities, towns, and neighborhoods. And so we can't expect to have to survive a world that is set up the way that is so off balance. There is no moderation. It's you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which is, a term that is invented to articulate an impossible task. You cannot pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. But that's the standard that we've created. It's literally an impossible standard. And so people will internalize that something is wrong with them, or that they're broken, or that this unhappiness and dissatisfaction and lack of peace within is a personal failing. And that maybe the discomfort that each and every one of us feels on some level has more to do with the world that we belong to and the values that have been upheld through our societies than it does with us. And so there's a few different ways that this energy can make us feel. It can make us wall up, and it can make us shut off from the rest of the world and really just look out for us and our own and not trust anyone and not take any chances. That's another way to build off of the existing imbalance and just kind of continue it in our personal lives, right? I don't need anybody. It's all me. That's a very off balance way of being, because we know that humans are social creatures. We need other people. We need other people. We've always needed other people. And the other choice that we can make is understanding that we do need people and that collaboration is possible. And in fact, we benefit from collaboration in an unjust world, because if justice only applies to some of us, as I said with that Libra eclipse, does it really apply to any of us? So when we understand that we all benefit from coming to these understandings of our shared humanity, like, yeah, you and I may be from different places, we might have different values, we might have different ideas about where to go from here, we might have different life experiences, different interests, different beliefs, but we understand that we benefit when we assure that there's mutual justice, that nobody can be singled out regardless of who they are or what group that they belong to. And with this full moon, I mean, there is this opportunity to kind of double down on me and mine. But there's also this opportunity to break through blocks, this idea that just worrying about yourself and the people that are like you is enough to guarantee your safety. Because I guarantee you that not everybody in Gaza liked their neighbors, right? But when those bombs started raining down, I doubt very much that it really mattered who liked who and what was going on, because you're all on the receiving end of injustice. Likewise, when Hurricane Helene destroyed entire cities and towns, it wasn't doing this on the basis of whatever group somebody belonged to. Natural disasters like this, you'll hear these stories about people risking everything to save somebody that they don't even know. And I think part of the reason why that human beings choose to put their own lives in danger to rescue other people is because if the shoe was on the other foot, wouldn't you want somebody to come rescue you? And I think that's really at the heart of the energy. There are two options, I think, with this full moon. It's people either double down on taking care of themselves and me and mine and fuck everybody else, or there's the people that realize that their futures, their fate, their sense of justice is bound up in the people around them and how we collaborate with each other. And collaboration is possible. We've been trained that strangers are our enemies and that people are competition for us and that people would stab you in the back to take what you have. And on a collective level, I feel that this full moon is asking us, is it worth it to us to stand up for what's right? Is it possible for us to get what we want and get ahead in life while injustice reigns so openly? And this is going to have many of us reflecting on what our role in this injustice is. So part of the reason why the end of 2024 has been so intense is this energy is really underscoring all of the many cracks in our systems. And Aries energy, it's not subtle, it's not quiet. It's really going to Kool-Aid man through the wall and show us exactly what it is that we have been neglecting and where we've gone really off course. In terms of mundane events, I'm not going to get too into details, but I do think that we can expect a real escalation with what's happening in the Middle East. And of course, it's already been escalating quite a bit over the course of eclipse season. But with this, I'm particularly looking at the Lebanese resistance and Israel. So I think we can expect more events there. And this full moon is going to illuminate just how out of control the war machine has gotten. And this full moon is also going to reveal the tremendous cost that endless military activity around the world has had. And I like to remind people that the US military is the #1 polluter in the world. And so as we're in the throes of beginning to realize collectively how deep into the climate crisis we really are, it's very important to draw a connection between the cost of war and the life of our planet and everybody that lives on it. Is it really worth it? The eclipse that we had recently in Libra made it very clear that there's a lot of work to be done in regards to justice, that we are far from where we need to be. And I feel like this full moon is kind of calling back to that energy. Not only are we having to confront the fact that things are out of balance, but this full moon is also asking us, what are we going to do about it on an individual level? We have done a lot of expecting other people to take care of the problem, expecting the problem to resolve itself, and that has not done the job. And in fact, when we do that on a collective scale, when we say it's somebody else's problem and not our own, look what happens. Look at the people that come in and say, you know what, I'm the one to fix it. And we've had a lot of people come in and claim that they're going to be the one to come and fix things. And yet we have a lot of people in positions of power that have a lot of money, connections, resources, and still these systems continue. And that's where we're at as Pluto comes to the end of Capricorn. We are seeing all of the failures, holes, and injustices that are just an inherent part of our capitalist economic system. So that eclipse was asking us, how can we join with others to work towards more justice? How is it mutually beneficial for us to do that? Whereas this full moon in Aries is asking us on a collective level, each and every one of you have a role. What is the role? What do you get out of more justice? What do you get out of things being more fair? And if you're not pissed, if you're not upset at this injustice, why do you think it doesn't affect you? Why do you think it doesn't affect you? And I do feel like with this full moon, in Aries, there will be plenty of people that will have circumstances facing them that draw attention to the fact that no, you're not outside of the game. You're not outside of the system. You are a part of it. You are impacted by it. And therefore, you should be invested in creating a vision for something better in the future. And so I think that the events of this full moon are going to crystallize that for a lot of people, that we need a new vision to work towards, and that our individual aspirations have no chance in hell under the current circumstances because we are facing existential threats, fascism, pandemics, climate crisis. These are all things that take people's lives. So how are we supposed to, live, laugh, love under these conditions? All of our hopes and dreams and aspirations on a personal level, the things that we're all striving for in this life, a lot of those things are not going to be possible if we are fighting for our lives to survive. So we need a new vision on a collective level. And I think that that's what this full moon is really going to highlight. This full moon is also offering us some choices, because we can either choose nationalism and just caring about us and ours and the people that, share certain labels with us and fuck everybody else. Not really justice, but it's a choice. Or we can understand that all of our futures are bound up together and we can resist that training that a lot of us have received, that, people that aren't like us are bad, they're dangerous, they're going to take things that we need, and then they're going to leave us for dead. That kind of thinking is a choice, and it's a choice that's gotten us to the moment that we're in. We already know how that plays out. We're actually living through that with Pluto and Capricorn, the extremes of what happens when we prioritize consumption, when we prioritize building fortunes for ourselves and our legacies at the expense of workers, at the expense of other people that we share the planet with. So we can double down on that, or we can reject some of that old training and choose something that is more progressive and perhaps more authentic with Aries energy, because authenticity is very important. You can't force yourself to care about other people if you're just not somebody that cares about other people. So I think this full moon will be revealing who does and doesn't care, who's going to be in this fight and who's going to sit on the sidelines because they think things are okay. So that's really what we're all facing right now as a collective, as human beings that are here and now on this planet together. But let's zoom in a little bit more and talk about this full moon on a personal level. How many new things have you started this year? And I know that this year has been fast and long and a lot has happened. So probably a lot of us have forgotten all of the things that we faced this year, but it's worth going and reflecting on that for this full moon and congratulate yourself for that. The things that you've done and bravely faced and pushed through, or maybe not so bravely, but guess what? You did it anyway. And so you got yourself through a lot of new situations and choices to where you're at right now. And so with this full moon energy, we are looking at this lack of justice in our society and in our world and what it has done to us on a personal level. How has it made you think small? How has it made you favor the people that you know and close yourself off to what's outside of that? How has the system that we live in transformed you? How has it closed you off from who you actually are? How has it limited your ideas of what's possible for yourself? Because living in a place where you have to work 40 plus hours a week to hopefully survive, and you can expect to get a little time off if you're lucky, if if you get a good job that has good benefits, maybe you'll get to retire. Hopefully if you have kids, you have enough free time to spend with them. Hopefully you have enough health insurance so that you live long enough and you can get the health care that you need. And hopefully you're not a member of a marginalized group where your safety and ability to pay your bills may be compromised just because of who you are. These systems have costs. Yeah, there is this collective injustice that we all have to face, but what about what it's done to us individually? So with this full moon, there's an opportunity to renew your vision of yourself, of who you are, of what you want, of where you're going and how you want to get there. So with this energy, even though it is Aries, I'm going to encourage you not to rush ahead. Really sit with this energy and consider what it is that you need to move forward. This is not about doing what everyone else is doing or feeling that you need to go with the crowd. Yeah, it is important to understand where other people are coming from, but that doesn't have to decide what you're doing and where you're going. And a lot of what this system has done is trained us to really narrow our options to these few little boxes of how we can be good and right and earn enough and be good enough to literally just make it through the world that we live in. And that strips us of our authenticity. That strips us of our ability to imagine a future for ourselves that's actually aligned with who we are on a personal level, not what the system tells us that we should be, not what our friends and family think we should be. With this full moon, there's also a gift, and the gift is knowing that it's not all going to happen overnight. This is a long-term path that we're on, and Aries wants it now, now, now. And it can be frustrating when that thing that we wanted hasn't shown up already. Actively pursuing goals doesn't mean that you see results right away, but deciding what direction you're going in and how you want to collaborate with other people to get there is revealing in and of itself. And you're learning and you're growing. And in some ways, you're just getting started. I don't care how old you are. We have a tendency in this culture to devalue learners and children and people who are works in progress, which guess what? That's all of us. We're all works in progress unless we're dead or just committed to being really boring. But honestly, the people who are works in progress are some of the most authentic people to me because they're always getting closer and closer to themselves. And there's always more to learn about ourselves and more to experience and grow and evolve. So, just because maybe you used to think that the world was one way or your life was going to be one way or that you were one way doesn't mean that you can't realize new things about yourself, that you can't realign with who you are authentically. I think being authentic and being yourself, sometimes people think that means being the same all the time. And the fact of the matter is that we can experiment and learn, oh, maybe this thing that I didn't try before is actually more me than anything that I've been doing for 20 years. We learned so much about ourselves by moving through life, by taking things step by step and understanding that it's a process. It's a process. As much as we want to be there and be fully formed and be able to fully articulate who we are and what we want, new things are going to happen along that path. Full moons are always about releasing something. And not just releasing for the sake of releasing, but releasing something so that you can make room to receive something that's probably a better fit for you. And if you're curious about what you might be receiving, I want you to look back at what kinds of intentions you were creating for yourself around April 8th of this year, particularly around your mindset, what you wanted to learn, and things you may have started around that time. Because if you've been directing your energy with those intentions, this is the full moon where you'll see some outcomes of that. But the outcomes may not be exactly what you thought you wanted or expected. And so regardless of how this full moon plays out for you, there's going to be an opportunity to get closer to who you are on a core level. This is going to be an opportunity for you to perhaps release some old ideas of who you are and what's possible for you, and how you can play a role in ensuring collective liberation, which includes you, which includes each and every one of us. Full moons are often times of high emotions, and people find themselves being extra sensitive. And I think that's tough for people because we have become so desensitized because we are constantly taking in a lot of information. A lot of it is very hard to digest, even on a good day. And yet we're just being bombarded with bad thing after bad thing after bad thing happening in the world. But we need to remember that our sensitivity is our strength, and Aries energy is really beautiful for that. So even if you find yourself in discomfort, if you find yourself feeling sensitive. Understand that this can be a moment where you bravely face yourself. You bravely face the reality of the situation that we find ourselves in collectively. The system has functioned off of each and every one of us, devaluing ourselves, losing sight of who we are on an individual level, on an authenticity level. Being in touch with our sensitivity lets us know who we actually are, what is actually affecting us, and perhaps where we should be taking action where we haven't, where we should be stepping up to the plate because we are a part of the collective. We don't benefit by sitting on the sideline and saying, it's actually up to somebody else how I should live my life, and you just let me know. This full moon is also a huge opportunity to release blocks to feeling like you're not important enough or skilled enough to make a difference in the face of a world of injustices, maybe even in the face of injustices in your own life. With Aries energy, it is important to aim for what it is that you want and be true to who you are. And with this full moon, I think we're really expanding our ideas of what's possible for ourselves, what we are capable of doing. You do not have to do anything to work with full moon energy other than, be conscious and aware. But if you'd like to do a ritual or a ceremony to work with this energy, you totally can. And in fact, I would recommend doing something around releasing blocks. And I would be working on releasing any limiting thoughts that you might have, or any barriers that you have around taking action, about being brave and getting involved, standing up for yourself and for others, and the things that are morally right to you. Because what does it mean to have morality and not stand on business? Not very much, right? This Aries energy is about standing on business. So let go of anything that is standing in the way of you doing just that. And if you're like, one of the things standing in the way of me, being authentic is my crappy job, and so I'm going to impulsively quit it. That's not the advice that I'm giving you here, but, maybe one of the blocks that you could release is limiting yourself to the idea that this one particular job has to be forever. And then what I would do is work on the energy of you embodying the fact that you can go out, you can apply for other jobs, you can take some classes, you can get yourself set up to move on to something that is more aligned. So with this full moon, we're absolutely going to see some historic events. That does not mean that we need to individually upend our lives just because it's a full moon. But what we can do is release the stuff that is holding us back in that moment. And that is a great use of this full moon energy. And regardless of what happens to you on a personal level, welcome the clarity that is going to come from an Aries full moon. There's a purity to Aries energy. And it doesn't mean that everything is going to click and fall into place right at the moment of this full moon. But we can lean into this energy to get a better sense of who we are, what we want, where we're going, and how we want to get there, and also with who. Before we get to that big, powerful full moon, we've got a whole week of life to live. So Wednesday, October 9th, big day. We've got Jupiter stationing retrograde at 12:04 a.m. Pacific time. So if you wake up and the energy is feeling a bit different, that may be part of why. And Jupiter spends about a third of the year retrograde. So, it's not something that is unfamiliar energy to us, but it might have us reconsidering things and maybe even thinking a little bit bigger than we did when Jupiter first moved into Gemini. This will also be helpful for some of that reimagining and revising our visions for that upcoming full moon. Now, Thursday, October 10th, that is a little bit more of a tense day. There is some friction in this day. And of course, when I talk about this astrology here at the end of the podcast, I'm speaking very generally, very zoomed out. So just because I'm saying that there may be some tension doesn't mean that you're going to have a bad day or that you're necessarily going to feel tense. But with the way that the astrology of this day is set up, we may be feeling some frustration on some level, and we may be dealing with people that are also dealing with frustration on some level. So not always a great recipe. So it's kind of a tread lightly day with yourself and with others. Friday at 9:31 a.m. Pacific time, we have the moon moving into Aquarius. And I think after that Capricorn moon the days before, I think it'll be a little bit of a relief. I think things will feel a little bit lighter, which will be nice. But we have another interesting event happening on Friday. Pluto stations direct at 5:31 p.m. Pacific time. So this is it, folks. This is the grand finale. And retrograde gets the bad reputation with people who aren't super familiar with astrology, which is so funny because this is going to be a shift in the energy. It's going direct. And that means like full steam ahead with this Pluto energy and the end of Pluto in Capricorn. Pluto spends about half the year retrograde. So it's not just the shift that's a big deal here. It's the context of everything else that we have going on at the moment. And so the rest of October until Pluto moves into Aquarius on November 19th is about to be very interesting. So that begins Friday, and we're kind of off to the races. Saturday, October 12th, we might find ourselves thinking, revising, maybe overthinking. So have some activities planned for the weekend. If you find yourself diving into unhelpful territory, you just want to have those in the back pocket ready to go. You might not necessarily want to be out in a crowd with this energy, out in the world socializing depending on your personal astrology. Granted, the moon will be in Aquarius, so, maybe that is your gag, but there is a lot of very introspective energy this weekend. Aside from that, just something to keep in mind as you plan your activities for this weekend, and you really do want to have some ideas of how you want to move through that energy. I'm a big fan of physical movement, and so it can be as simple as a walk. Moving your body helps move that energy. Also, music can be a really helpful component of that. Having a good playlist ready to go may be worth figuring out this week. And I'm thinking something that's a little emotional but cathartic at the same time for this weekend would be a good fit. And there's this buildup on Saturday as Mercury gets ready to move the following day. So there may be this note of discomfort playing throughout the day in the background if you're sensitive to energy. But it may also be a day where you're able to make some decisions to move yourself forward in terms of your mindset. I do think we'll have some very interesting news over the weekend. And Sunday, October 13th, things are going to feel a bit more serious, emotional, introspective, as we start leading up to that full moon that's happening on Thursday, October 17th. So Mercury moves into Scorpio on the 13th, and that happens at 12:23 p.m. Pacific time. And it's followed shortly after by the moon moving into Pisces at 12:55 p.m. So we might be in our feelings. That's a lot of water energy. We might be contemplating, meditating, or maybe going down some rabbit holes. And just make sure they're constructive rabbit holes, because it may be easy with this energy to get lost in the sauce. But if you pick a delicious sauce to get lost in, I really don't see the problem. Monday, October 14th, things are probably going to feel a little bit slower, a little bit more serious and contemplative as we picked up that energy from the weekend, carrying it with us into the week. So it's an easy day to feel some frustration or irritation. So, be on the lookout for that and tread lightly with others, especially, it's a Monday in late stage capitalism. My God. Look for inspiration in your emotions. Lean into creativity in your spiritual practice. There's a reason that it's a practice. You got to keep doing it. You got to keep returning to it. Ask for support and guidance when you need it. And we can always ask for help. We can ask for help from people that we know, but we can also ask our ancestors. We can ask the universe. We can ask whatever it is that we believe in. And it's okay. It's okay to ask for help. And don't be surprised if help shows up, and maybe in ways that you don't expect. But let these days leading up to the full moon really be about sifting and sorting through what you're ready to let go of with that full moon. And so sometimes leaning into the things that we want more of can reveal the things that we're kind of ready to let go of. Tuesday, October 15th. In the US, this is one of those days we might just wake up to some interesting world news. This day could feel a little bit draggy, a little bit outside of time, but the energy will pick up in the afternoon here in the US when the moon moves into Aries. This is another day to really lean into creativity and spirituality. You might find some really beautiful insights or even just daydreams land that day. So make sure that you're paying attention. Write things down or lean into it and ride that energy if that's how you're feeling on the day of. You might find that those inspired moments lead to some new starts, new projects, or new approaches. And the 15th and 16th especially will feel like a buildup of energy as we move closer and closer to that full moon. It's almost like a balloon that needs to pop. You're just waiting. Really trying to lean in and work with the energy rather than resisting it, because that just wastes a lot of energy. This full moon is really personal, so there will be a lot to observe about yourself as we move towards it. And all of that information can be a gift if we're committed to moving ourselves forward. As a reminder, this podcast is available because it's 100% listener supported. If you'd like to get even more petty astrology, connect with the community around this podcast, and support the work that I do here, be sure to click the link in the show notes and join us over on Patreon. I want to thank my Patreon sponsors for their support. I'm hoping to get a full moon live stream on the books for this one. And don't forget, you can revisit video of my talk on the full moon on YouTube too. If you haven't already followed the podcast, given it a rating, or left a review, why not? Those help more listeners find us so I can make more stuff. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. That's it for this episode. Tune in next week for even more petty astrology.